Hello, Skiff Travel Podcast listeners. It's me, Will Slickers, and I am back with another episode from one of the podcasts that was recently acquired by Skift. Now, last week you heard from us at Good Morning Hospitality, and this week we thought it was important for you to hear from Katie Cline at Sweet Success. Katie Cline is an award-winning public relations professional who has led global communications for world-renowned hotel brands such as Ritz-Carlton, W Hotels, St. Regis, The Luxury Collection, and more in both New York City and London. She's the host of this new Skiff podcast called Sweet Success, where she interviews hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators weekly to uncover the strategies and secrets behind the world's best brands and entrepreneurs. On this episode of Sweet Success, Katie Cline sits down with the top chef judge and culinary storyteller Gail Simmons to talk travel, taste, and the unexpected power of a good meal. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we have, and if you do, please like and subscribe or leave a positive review. And now, I hope you enjoy this episode of Sweet Success right here on Skift.
I'm Gail Simmons, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I am really excited to welcome Gail Simmons to the show. Gail is a culinary expert, author, host, and producer. You probably know her best from her role as judge on Bravo's Emmy Award-winning series, Top Chef, where she has been a fixture since the beginning. Now entering its 23rd season, the show remains the #1 food program on cable, and Gail's insight, wit, and palate have played a huge part in that. She's also the author of 2 acclaimed books, with a third on the way, as well as the co-founder of Bumble Pie Productions. Gail, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
I read an article about you, and it said that when you first joined Top Chef, MySpace was the #1 social network at the time. And to me, that just really puts in perspective how long you've been on the show, how long you've been in our homes, and really how long
old I really am.
Oh, no. How long you've been shaping the industry.
Yes, let's say it like that. I will say I did not realize that fact, but it tracks. We started recording or, shooting the first season of Top Chef in 2005. So 20 years ago.
Wow.
The majority of my adult life, I've been making this show, and it is not lost on me how rare that is and how unexpected it was at the time that it took the path it took. And I'm still doing it 20 years later. I'm still here.
And let's talk about that unexpectedness, because I also read that being an on-camera personality was not what you had set out to do. So can you give us that backstory on how you got into the food world in the first place?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief because it was many years of lead up before the television piece.
Sure.
I don't think any of us on Top Chef, that's not maybe entirely true, but I don't think any of us who were making the show at the very beginning and in those first few years had any idea of what we were doing in the broader scope of the industry and entertainment and the world of television. I mean, obviously it was evolving as we were doing it. So we could have never predicted. We didn't have a strategy. We didn't know what reality television would become, what food television would become, what was in the zeitgeist. We didn't know about streaming. We didn't know about Instagram. I mean, obviously the world was in a different place. Yeah. And in hindsight, it's very easy to see that evolution. But at the time, I grew up in Canada, in Toronto. I went to McGill University and started really getting into food in my last year of college, which, wasn't really a thing at the time. I mean, the Food Network was in its nascency and it wasn't on my radar. But what became on my radar was other forms of food media, food magazines, which until that time in my life were really like my mom's magazines. My mom was actually an incredible cook, home cook, but ahead of her time. And she ran a little cooking school out of our home for women and men in our neighborhood at a time when like people were trying to make food as convenient as possible in the home so that they could get out of the kitchen. My mom was kind of like leaning in and still really believed in cooking from scratch and cooking simply and thoughtfully and home, being a talented home cook and entertainer. And so that was always in my consciousness, I guess, but I never thought of it as a career, even though that was so much of what my mom did at the time. And it was only after I graduated from college that I thought that I wanted to work in the food world, but specifically, I never wanted to be a chef, and that remains true. My idea then, which I did manifest in hindsight, was that I wanted to be in food media. But at the time, food media, the word media really meant one thing. It meant print publications. So my, very lofty dreams were to go work for a food magazine, to go work at Gourmet Magazine or Food Wine Magazine or one of those very glamorous places and be a food critic, quote unquote. But I really didn't know what a food critic was. Like I didn't know that much about food. I just knew I liked to cook and I liked to eat, and sort of that simple. So naive and sweet of me, but I guess that's how it should be at that stage in your life, your career, right? Your dreams, you still have big dreams and are trying to figure out how to make them come true. So I moved back from college and I did love writing, and I wanted to write and travel and cook and eat. And so I got a job very luckily at a local city magazine in Toronto called Toronto Life, which is sort of like New York Magazine or Los Angeles Magazine, excellent, high quality city magazine. And I was an intern there. And then I went on to be an assistant at a big national newspaper in Canada. And each time I was drawn to the food critic and tried to get them to let me write about food and trail them and follow them and learn about what it meant to be a food writer. Until finally an editor said to me, "Here's the thing, kid, you don't know anything about food. I mean, anyone can be a writer. You can train yourself to write. But if you want to own a category, if you want to find your gig, your niche, you need to learn about that first to write about it with any type of authority. So if food is your thing, if that's your beat, go learn how to cook, go become fluent in that language. It's like if you want to be a war reporter, you can't do it from your couch. You got to go to the front lines." And that was sort of the excuse I needed. It was the advice I needed to give me permission to sort of quit the job and leave home and venture into the world to learn to do just that. And it was the excuse I needed to move to New York City because it was, for me, the culinary capital of the world, not just from a restaurant and food perspective, but from being, at that time, really the epicenter of food media, because that's where all the big food magazines and newspapers were, in the New York Times, obviously dining section. And, there weren't blogs. There wasn't really social media at that time. It was really about print.
Yeah.
And so I packed up and I moved to New York City, and I need to skip ahead a little bit because we're going to be here all day. But ultimately, I enrolled in culinary school. And I took it very seriously that if I was going to be a food writer, I needed to learn about food. And so I needed to go to school for it. And I considered going to culinary school like my master's degree, right? I enrolled in professional culinary school. I was there for a year. I went to do an apprenticeship, when I was done. And I at first wanted to, go work in the test kitchen of Gourmet Magazine as an apprentice. But my school convinced me that I still didn't know about, I wasn't a cook. I wasn't a chef. I wasn't an expert yet. Go cook in a restaurant, because that's where you learn really what the industry's like. And if you want to, again, write about it, you need to be on the inside. And it was the hardest but smartest piece of advice anyone's given me, and thing I've ever done. I worked in 2 very ambitious kitchens at the time in New York City, and they completely flattened me. Hardest jobs, as a kind of lowly line cook, but incredibly rewarding in terms of what I learned and gained from those experiences. And then after several months of cooking as a cook, I went back to that original mission and said, okay, I feel like I've gotten some experience here. It's time to go back to that media idea, because I still never wanted to cook professionally. I wanted to get back to writing. And I got a job first for 2 years working as the assistant to the food critic at Vogue magazine, which was an incredible job for one of the greatest writers of our time, long format magazine writer, exceptional, brilliant man, Jeffrey Steingarten. And I did everything for him. I tested recipes and I did research and I, you know, ran around New York City discovering ingredients and speaking with chefs and interviewing people. And it really was an amazingly informative job that gave me access and introductions to every major chef in New York City, in the country, in the world. You know, Jeffrey would go to Paris for months and I would do research on the restaurants he was going to. And then all those chefs would come back and be in our kitchen with us. And I could cook with Pierre May and I could, you know, I met all these incredible people. And from there, I went to work for Danielle Boulou for several years in marketing and PR. And it was through Danielle that I met the people at Food and Wine magazine. And a job became available at Food and Wine after 3 years of me working for Danielle, which was also like an MBA in kind of behind the scenes of running fine dining restaurants. And I loved that job and I loved working for him. But again, wanted to get back to that mission of print and writing. And so when a job came available at Food and Wine, I grabbed it. And I was at Food and Wine, you know, grabbed it, meaning begged for it, and got it finally. And I went to work at Food and Wine running. At first, I was working in the marketing department, actually. And within a year, I took over the biggest event of their year, running the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. And at that exact same time, at the exact same time that I took that job, another huge thing happened. Bravo came to Food and Wine magazine, to our publisher and our editor-in-chief, and said, we have this idea for a show that's never been done before about the real lives of cooks and the restaurant industry. And we want to make a food competition that kind of throws open the door to the kitchen, the professional kitchen, but also discovers new talent and sort of exalts and gives opportunity to young chefs in the industry. And it sounded like a crazy idea because there was nothing like it at the time. Remember, we're talking 2005, there was Iron Chef Japan, the only food competition that existed at the time. And that was an extreme. And then the other reality TV that was on back then had nothing to do with food. In fact, it was like Survivor and Fear Factor. So for me, the points of reference for reality competitions were very, very different, right? It was the beginning of that genre of television. And when I heard about the opportunity, my boss, the publisher, came to me and said, you know, I'd had a lot of PR experience having worked for Danielle Boulou, and they had put me through some media training, and I had started doing a little bit of media work, you know, front of camera work on behalf of Food and Wine when they needed someone on the Today Show or local news talking about food trends or making a summer peach tart, you know, because I had the culinary experience and the PR experience, I had, you know, a little bit of on-camera experience. But this was also so completely secondary to my main job. The thought of doing anything more, you know, public facing, camera facing wasn't even in my purview. I mean, I was happy. I'd reached my goal, right? I was working in a major food publication. I was running the greatest food event in America. I was working with the best chefs around the country. Like, I was there. I was done. I was happy as a clam. And so when they asked me to go sort of temporarily on this lark to represent Food and Wine on this new food show, it really was an afterthought to me. It was just this idea that I was going to go. And I think my publisher and editor-in-chief felt the same to some degree, not to diminish it, but we just had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
It was really out of left field. And I went to San Francisco to shoot that first season of Top Chef, really thinking I'd go for 3 weeks, do this for Food and Wine because they'd asked me to represent the magazine on this television show. And then I'd come back and go back to my job and like the rest of my life and just continue on. Never did I think that 20 years later, I'd still be making the show and the show would evolve in the way it has, and that it would really change the course of my career in so many ways that I could have never imagined. That was a very long answer to your question. I apologize.
I love that answer. I love that story. What stands out to me most too is that you were really playing the long game from the beginning. And I feel like right now, you hear a lot of like Gen Z perhaps of being like, first day on the job, like, well, I don't want to cut the swatches or do whatever the interns were doing. Like, I want to do what the SVP is doing. And we're like, well, the SVP took 25 years to get there,
Correct. Right.
And for
Yes.
you to say, like, my goal is to be a food writer, but I need to take this multi-year detour into, like you said, really tough spaces like
Mhm.
kitchens. That wasn't like, oh, let me go have this cakewalk of a job, pun intended, You really saw what you wanted. You knew that in your core. And I don't think it was naive, as you said in the beginning. I think it was like you were following just those little signs along the way of like what you were
Yes.
interested in versus like you needed to know, hey, I want to be a television food personality and like had it all mapped out from day
There was
one.
no television food personality. And I think that was part of the reason it worked, to be honest, because I didn't have a preconceived notion of what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be in food media.
Right.
And I had the wherewithal, even if I had no idea how to get there or what it would look like when I got there, I had the wherewithal to just take every opportunity to say yes, to walk through a door, even if it didn't look exactly the way that I imagined it would look, right? Just take the opportunity, try it out. The worst that would happen would be that I would gain experience from it in the food world. Because for me, it was about food first and everything else second. And food was my goal, right? It wasn't about television. It wasn't even about magazines. It was like media means 100 different things, right? There's 100 different subcategories within this umbrella term of media. And I understood that it didn't matter what form the media took. I just wanted to be in it through the lens of food. And food was always first and foremost for me, whether it was cooking it, eating it, traveling for it, as a way to kind of translate it and champion it to the sort of larger world. And that was always my goal. And so I kept thinking, if I just stick to that goal, it's going to take me places. Case in point, when I left Vogue magazine, which was me working in food media, it was at a very difficult time in New York City history. It was right after September 11th. And getting a job was really hard for a junior person in food media, let alone someone who was Canadian and didn't even have I needed to get a visa. I was on a visa. And it was expiring, and any job I was going to take to stay in New York needed a visa. And no one in New York City was just throwing a visa at a 20-something kid with, 4 years of experience. But Danielle Ballou took a chance on me, and he said, you know what, I'm growing my company and I need someone else in my marketing department and PR and events. I need someone to work on my book projects with me. And he trusted and knew that I had great training, having worked for Jeffrey at Vogue. And he said, no problem. We can get you a visa. Half my kitchen is French. We have immigration lawyers on standby. Don't worry about that. And he was the only person who understood it and also was willing to say, like, just be part of this team because you're eager and you want to learn. But for me, it was such a left turn. Like, it was a departure from that main goal of food media, right? Going to work for a chef in a restaurant group was not the plan, right? Was not the long-term plan. But I knew, first of all, Danielle Ballou offered you a job, you just take the job. That's my advice for all of you ever in the world. If Danielle Ballou comes to say, work for me, comes and says, work for me, you just do it, because he is the greatest boss and he's brilliant and he's obviously talented, but he's a hugely exceptional leader. And I didn't even know that at the time, but I just knew it was Danielle Ballou offering me a job. I didn't really care what I was going to do for him because I knew I was going to help him with his books, help him open restaurants. And I would learn about food and the industry through him. And I always say it was like my MBA. It really, so all to say it was a departure, but in the end, it was because of that job that I was able to then do everything else and go back to that media idea, and look where it took me. But I could have never been on Top Chef and worked in the position I am now in the food world had I not done those years for Danielle, which at the time felt like it was a departure from my path, but really it was a detour that got me there.
I always find it so interesting because when we look back, and you come from a PR background, I come from a PR background, so we're probably exceptionally good at this. But when you look back, you're able to put the pieces together and not only say this is why it was all meant to be, but this is how it needed to be in order for it to come together, right? But we don't know that at the time.
Of course not. So I don't even think it's a divine plan. I just think it's trusting your instinct and then leveraging each experience to get to
exactly. You didn't get stuck in the cerebral of like, well, this isn't writing or this isn't what I
Correct.
wanted to do and this is taking me away. You were like, this is within food. This is for someone who has an incredible persona, respect in the industry. I know I can learn. And it sounds like you spent so much of those early days just saying, where can I go to learn? And
Yes,
I almost
that's
think
all
we
it
all need
was.
to do that. Like, let's just
Yes,
stop thinking about what it's doing for us or are we getting where we're going? Like,
correct.
what are we interested in and what do we want to learn about and who can teach us?
Correct. That is
Yeah.
exactly what it was. And it was really 6 or 7 years from start to finish when I first came to New York of just finding great mentors. And I was very lucky. Like I'm not saying like I got to work for these two people before I even got to Food and Wine, where I had two other incredible bosses, but who were true leaders, and that was incredibly serendipitous and amazing that I got that experience. And that may sound extreme, right? But I do think that it was more just about finding great people to learn from and to keep my mouth shut and, well, shut from talking, but open to tasting. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had said, obviously, when you started on Top Chef, no one knew what it was going to become. There was, maybe Survivor, they were tasting like cockroaches or something, but there was
Correct.
no other food media on TV at the time. Now you're entering the 23rd season. As you said, it's been a part
Wild.
of like most of your adult life. What is different? And I imagine the answer is probably everything. But from that first season to now, whether it be behind the scenes or for
Right.
you, or what's different?
I mean, so much is different on so many levels. And you're perfectly right. I mean, on the micro level of the job, the show has evolved so much, right? We're a much bigger production now, and we are much more in tune and in a rhythm of how our show works, and we know our audience really well, and we can push ourselves and our contestants and our casting department in a very specific direction because we know what we want every season. We have a great sort of formula, although it's a very loose formula, which I love so much and what I respect so much about our producers, that we have this space to play in, but they allow us every season to reinvent it and to adjust and pivot and really look closely together at what works and what doesn't and make it better next time. And we do that in a lot of ways because the show's format is also in a different location every season, which wipes the slate clean. It's not a studio show. We are out in the field every day in a new city, in a new country, in a new part of the world, which just completely allows us to expand, our culinary vision and invent new challenges and get to know a new culture through the lens of food. But also it allows us to raise the bar for our contestants. And I think that's changed. I mean, the really obvious change from the beginning is that first season had a real mix of contestants, right? Because we didn't really know the show we were making yet. Some were culinary students, some were sort of elevated home cooks, and then there were some line cooks. And now, very quickly, we realize our audience wants the pros. This isn't a show about people who want to be a chef. There's plenty of other shows about that, or who think it'd be fun, or who want to be, who are like great home cooks. This is a show about culinary professionals at the highest level. And that's what our audience wants to see. That's the world that they don't know. And that's kind of the magic of throwing open this door and seeing it from the inside. And year after year, since really season 2 or 3, we have been able to cast better and better, higher and higher levels of talent, because it's really about the drama in the kitchen. We've also done less and less reality in the show. The early years had a lot more drama about the contestants' personal lives and about their interactions within each other. And now we realize no one really is that interested in it either, unless it pertains to their cooking. And so we've honed really deeply in on the cooking, the challenges, the cultural significance, their personal stories and storytelling, their heritage. And it's really just about them telling their stories through food for us and our audience. And then we, as the translators and the sort of taste buds of our audience. We've also tightened up so many different things on the show. We've also been able to have really stark conversations about the bigger world through food, because food touches so many things: climate change, immigration, poverty, obesity, agriculture, sustainability. Like, there's just so many things The pandemic was a hugely pivotal time for everyone, but for the show, because we had to keep going and figure out how to portray just how deeply the pandemic hit the food industry in many ways, unlike any other industry.
Yeah.
And how significant that was to our contestants and how it affected their lives and the lives of restaurants around the world. And so it has allowed us to tell very honest stories about the restaurant world and have really honest conversations. And that's been amazing. And that has changed a lot. Like it's become it's become more of a show over the years that sort of is the compass for the food world itself and a reflection of the food world itself. And that's not to say we are leading the food world. I think it's a real symbiosis. We reflect what's going on in the real restaurant and hospitality industry. And at the same time, we set precedents that then trickle back down into the space and into the restaurant industry. I also think, obviously, we've created an army of household names and talents who have gone on after being on the show, and not just the winners, who've created hundreds of successful restaurants and brands in the industry and have become in their own right just superstars and huge leaders philanthropically, commercially, and they have spread our mission, right? And we could have never anticipated that more than any other reality show across genres. I'm not even talking about food, music, fashion. There's no other show that's produced that many household names that have made impacts on their own industry. And I don't think it's because we are that much better. I think it's just that there's also a lower barrier to entry in terms of opening a restaurant versus starting a global fashion brand or getting a recording contract. So we've been able to make real inroads and change our industry through it. And I do think that Top Chef, in a way, and it sounds grandiose, but it had changed the economy of dining in America, because people now seek out Top Chef restaurants all over the country and now even all over the world. And that changes the way people travel for food. And, if anyone's ever been on Top Chefs, it's part of their lore, and it brings them into this family we've created and allows them a really huge platform. And we never in a million years anticipated any of it.
Hearing you talk about the show like this, to me, it makes perfect sense why you're in 23rd season and you're still number one. Because what I heard you say is the travel component. I think that's really interesting. Like
It's
you said,
huge.
you're showcasing places, you're showcasing different types of people, different types of food. You also talked about COVID and really being able to chronicle moments in time. So season 1 to season 23 was always going to be different, even if, behind the scenes production didn't change and, who's on the show didn't change, because the nature of what you guys are doing is so zeitgeisty.
Right. It is. And what's interesting about that too, that I think about so much, and another way that we've changed, is the way that we and the greater, world of restaurants and views on what makes good food have changed. When we started 20 years ago, the world viewed fine dining and good food in a much more singular way, right? It was Western, European, largely white at a certain high level of fine dining. And over the last 20 years, that has changed so deeply. And thank God, you look back and think about how upside down it felt, that we were really only telling one story or a very narrow story about food. And the travel components and the way that we look at cooks and what makes food good. And it's really about heritage and personal storytelling from all over the world. And our cast looks very different. And it does, because we have now, and it wasn't because we weren't putting, let's say, women, people of color up front. It was that they were hard to find because there were so fewer opportunities in the structure, in the systemic kind of structure of the industry to allow for upward mobility.
Yeah.
And we now can talk about that. We're not perfect. We haven't solved it, but we can at least shine a huge light on it and talk about it openly.
Yeah.
And change it and evolve it. And so now I think it has trickled into and is much more reflective of how we all want to eat, where we are all from, the people who are making our food, what they look like, where they came from, what this country like runs on, right? And it's not white tablecloths and white, toques. It's much more diverse than that. And thank God for it. And our palates have expanded because of it. And not just ours. I mean, I think everybody's.
Yeah. And within that too, I think hospitality and what that means.
Yes.
That has evolved too. Like if you think about the actual restaurant experience for diners.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? Like what does great hospitality look like in restaurants today?
Sure. And I think it's very much the same. It's not anymore only about great hospitality, meaning, again, a white tablecloth, 14 forks and 17 wine glasses at your place. I don't want to eat that way very often. Yes, that's luxury. That's special occasion. That can be an incredible experience at the highest level. But for me, hospitality is about storytelling. It is about warmth. It is about caring and thinking about your customer and your guest experience and making them feel welcome no matter where they're from, no matter where you are, no matter, who they are. And I think that goes hand in hand with another major change in that, originally when we first started doing Top Chef from a location perspective and a travel perspective, we covered all the big cities. We did New York and LA and San Francisco and Boston and Chicago and Miami, because those were the places where there was good food, right? Mm-hmm. But now we know in the year 2025 that there is good food everywhere. There is great hospitality everywhere. There is ancestry and immigration pathways and storytelling and passion for, really quality food and farming, and, the support system that allow restaurants to do what they do in every corner of this country. And it has allowed us, our show, to go to parts of the country and the world that I never thought I would go, right? We've done seasons in Kentucky and in Wisconsin and in South Carolina and in, Colorado and places that 10, 15 years ago, you would never say are quote unquote food cities.
Yeah.
But let me assure you, every city is a food city because every city has a humongous working restaurant industry because that's how tourism runs and how culture runs. And restaurants are hubs for community, and you'll find it in every city, no matter where you go. So it's just about doing that deep dig. And that's what we try to do on the show.
What was one of the surprising places, like the ones that you've listed off? What was the one that stuck out to you the most that you thought, never in a million years did I think I'd maybe either want to come here or be able to come here? Like, what was the one, if you had to pick, that you were like, this
there's been a lot, but I would say maybe Houston. I had never been to Houston. I'd never been to a lot of these cities. Never been to Milwaukee. Sort of. Anyway, never been to a lot of the cities that we went to on the show. But Houston was interesting because it's a big city. It's the fourth biggest city in the United States, I think, fourth or fifth biggest. But I had never an occasion to go. My image of it was just this sort of sprawling, swampy, industrial city. But when we went there, I guess it was season 19, it proved me wrong. I mean, it is sort of all of those things, but the culture of food in Houston is so fascinating. And it just taught me so much about America, right? And it taught me so much about the local culture, but also the immigrant pathways that shape the South and Texas, and specifically, right? And the how closely connected it is to New Orleans and the shrimping and fishing of the Gulf of Mexico and the Vietnamese community and the because there is this whole sort of Viet Cajun culture that was born out of the mixing and mingling of this massive Vietnamese community that came originally for the shrimping industry, both in New Orleans and in Houston, and created its own thing. And also an amazing Nigerian community. And obviously there's a lot of barbecue culture and on and on. And, there's like German culture and, and all these, it's not a coincidence that they're all living together and creating new cuisines of their own.
Right.
And Houston was really complex in that way. Really, really interesting.
I had no idea. It's not on my list of places to go, but now it is.
You want to eat there.
Yeah, definitely. Gail, over the summer, you were a panelist at Travel and Leisure's World's Best Summit. And the topic that you guys were discussing was partnerships and connection, the power of brand. And when you were introduced by Jackie Gifford, who Travel and Leisure's amazing editor in chief, she was moderating and she said something that really stuck with me, that you are someone who started working for a brand, as many of us are.
Mhm.
Then you became a brand and now you've created a brand. Do you see it that way too? And what to you are the key differences between those three?
I did not see it articulated as beautifully and powerfully as Jackie said it on stage at World's Best Summit. But I understand it. And sometimes it's helpful to see how people view you from the outside. And that was eye opening for me too, to position me in that way. And like anyone, sometimes I have trouble seeing clearly how far I've come or what I've accomplished. And I will say, you asked what the differences are, but I want to start with what the similarities are, which are that in all three instances, I'm passionate about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked for Food and Wine magazine, which was my professional home for 15 years, I loved, and I still love that brand, but from a distance now, I really felt like we were creating something I truly believed in, that was intentional. And that was mostly due to the team of people that I worked with to do it, because they were best in class. And not only were they people I admired, but I just felt like we were doing work that felt so satisfying to me. We were all in it together on the same page. We had a unified vision for that brand. And I loved working for that brand to expand it and to deliver on the promise that we were making to our readers and our customers in that way. And I think the same thing has remained true even when I sort of left and became a brand of me, where I believe in taking on projects with people who have that same intention of me as me. And how do I make sure that if I am the face of my brand, I'm the name on the door, and I said this somewhat in the panel, that I need to really still believe in and be passionate about what I'm doing, or else it is so transparent and inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a poker face. So I really want to just make sure that what I'm doing, I can believe in and feels true to me. And that might feel cliche, but it requires something that many years ago someone said to me, and I didn't understand until I started my own business, which was, you're going to say no more than you say yes. And I didn't understand what that meant when I was just leaving Food and Wine and going out on my own, because in my head, I'm like, why would I say no to anything? I'm a yes person. I want to dive in. I want to do everything. And they explained to me that, but you also need to set standards and also boundaries about who you are, because everything dilutes your brand. And then you don't know what you stand for. So it's important to think through your decision making, because that will give you the ability to create your brand properly and with strength and with conviction. And I think then in creating a brand, creating our production company, and now taking my position from being on camera to behind the scenes myself and developing and producing projects, I still need to think of it in the same way. And it's still about working with people and projects that spark in me, passion and belief and intention, but also in terms of what differentiates, I think it's now just feeling like I'm finally in a place where I have a voice of conviction myself. So it came from finding that voice, working for another brand that could show me their voice, to finding my own voice and what makes my point of view specific and my point of view purposeful, to then using my voice. So looking for it, finding it, and then actually being able to use my voice and have confidence in myself to make those decisions that then affect other people's work as well, and creating my own team that can do that.
It's interesting too what you're saying about no and yes, because I feel like you started your career saying yes to
Yes,
everything.
of course.
And then once you figured out, I like this, I don't like this is me, this isn't me, that's when the no can enter the conversation. But you started with the yeses in order to be
Yes.
able to give intentional no's, I would
Well,
say.
exactly. And I think that that's a very natural path for anyone in their career as they go from sort of like the lower rungs up a little bit with a little more experience, and you get older and you learn from your experience, and you sort of become more senior in your role. Those first few years, of course, you just need to take it all in and do everything, and like say yes when someone tells you to go on a screen test for a crazy reality show, because you never know where it'll lead. Even though you think you don't know how you're going to explain it to your mother that you're going on a crazy reality show, just try it, right? Because you don't have much to lose, right? And it can only, as I said before, it can only garner more experience that you can then use in your arsenal. But as you get older, you learn lessons and you understand a little more who you are, and there's also more to lose. So I need to be more intentional. I have a family now. I have employees who rely on me for their livelihoods. And so, that also becomes the drive to make the decisions you make. And as I said on the panel as well, I can't be everything to everyone. So I need to have sort of one starting point and remember that everything I do, it can be across many categories and mediums, but it all has to go back for me to that mission. And it still remains, just as it did 25 years ago, it still remains first and foremost about food and how food can tell stories and enrich our lives.
Something else you said on the panel that I really liked was that when it comes to personal branding, you live in the body of your brand, just like you said, it's
Yes.
your name on the door, right? Is there a difference between Gail as a mom, as a friend, as a person, and then Gail as maybe the public might perceive you?
I want to say no, but in my house, we have a saying that there's TV Gail and there's home Gail. And they are different because I think I'm actually quite private in my home life. I don't share everything, and that's okay because it's mine to keep for myself. And I think maybe people will be surprised because on the outside it looks a certain way because that is the building of the brand, right? That at home, I'm not eating 6-course meals every night. I'm not cooking every single night. I just can't possibly do it all. I have help. I have an amazing partner. I have, as does any brand that needs to grow. You can't grow as the CEO of any company and still be washing the dishes every night, right? And still be working in the mailroom every night. And that's been a hard lesson because it's a lesson in control and delegation. And, but it has to evolve in terms of who I am too, because I need those boundaries personally to have my home life and my kids. I love that I live in a place, I live in Brooklyn, and I love that I live in a real community where I'm walking my kids to school and I'm in my pajamas half the time and nobody cares and everybody knows me. And I can then also go 1.5 miles into Manhattan to be on television within an hour. And so yes, there is a difference, and for me, it is about drawing boundaries. I'm not saying I'm a different person in either place. I don't think I am in terms of my core values.
Yeah.
But I certainly separate the two because I want to be present in both places.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about living in Brooklyn and the community and everything too, because I was thinking of you yesterday as I picked up my daughter from school. She's 3, and she decided to just have a full-on tantrum meltdown for the entire 30-minute walk, and it was 89 degrees out, so I'm sweating and she's screaming the whole time. And I just thought, like, I wonder if Gail ever has this moment. And if you have a thought of
Katie, all the time. All the
okay,
time.
that
And
makes
you
me
know
feel
what?
good.
Here's the thing that we all have to remember. Everybody does. I can say sort of a crass expression, but like everybody is human, right?
Mhm.
No one, look, power and influence and money, you can be a you can be a massive star, and that allows you a lot more support to not have to be the person with the breakdown. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Everyone has emotion. If you are a parent and you are parenting, that is the job, to parent.
Mhm.
And no one has, even the Prince and Princess of Wales, which I look at and I'm always like, does their children, what happens if you have a child? What happens if they gave birth to my child who
I know.
loves to have public emotional outbursts? Like they do. Everybody does. And
Yeah.
I struggle with it myself because I feel like sometimes I have to be perfect out in public because I want to be professional and I
Right.
want people to think of my brand in a certain way and I want to keep it that way. But also, like, I don't know, I also want us all to get over this pedestal that we put each other on because no one sees what's really going on behind the scenes. And now everybody has a
Yeah.
platform, right? Everybody
Yeah.
has a social media presence and everyone can craft that social media presence to be whatever they want it to be. And that's okay. They are entitled to that. I do the same. And I could say I'm guilty of doing the same, but I'm not going to have any guilt over it because that is my brand. But I am
Right.
also a real human being.
Yeah.
Right. And my son is running around right here in front of me. And, he wants to come on and say hello, but he knows to
He
give
is
me
welcome.
some space right now. He might. He just went downstairs for some reason. But anyway, yes, all the time. And, you have to just go with the punches. And like life is messy and silly and ridiculous. And also, it doesn't mean I feel very lucky to be in a position that I'm in to get to do a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, I think my kids, they don't care about Top Chef.
No.
They've never watched an episode. My 11-year-old markedly doesn't want to see it. And I get it because she just wants mom. And
Right.
that's like a different, she goes to events with me. She comes on set all the time. She's very proud of me.
Yeah.
But I get that she doesn't want to see me in that way. She just wants me to be there at night to tuck her in and to help her with her homework and to make her lunch.
Yeah. To be that human that you were talking about. And you mentioned with your community in Brooklyn. And I think that's a lot of what we heard in the summit is that people are looking for connection. So
Yes.
how do you feel like food and the culinary scene plays a role in hospitality and travel as a whole?
They're intrinsically linked, right? There's no way to
Yeah.
separate those things. I think we travel to expand our view of the world. And a very powerful way to do that is through eating, right? And food and hospitality.
My favorite way.
Yes, it's the only way. I don't understand it otherwise. But to that point, very literally, like I make sense of the world through food, right? Food tells the story of a people, of a place, of a soil, of a moment in time, of history. Why some people eat with chopsticks and others eat with forks and knives. All of that, to me, informs and makes sense of our very, very complicated world. And so I think hospitality as a layer of those things is really important because it allows a back and forth between guests or between experiencer and the person who is showing the experience. But I think they affect each other, right? If a restaurant, hotel, or any point of tourism wants to welcome people so that they understand, so that the outsider, the guest understands their point of view more by giving them an experience that welcomes them in, that makes them feel part of the community, that shows that they are listening and making that guest feel seen, but also can show them something new and expand, maybe even change their mind about a place, an ingredient, a dish, then you've achieved something really special. And that becomes like an osmosis effect. Not only does the hospitalitarian feel like they have educated you and given you a really joyful experience, but you are going to take that experience on with you to whatever you do next. You're going to talk about it. You're going to share it. You're going to internalize it and bring it home with you in who knows how many ways.
I'd love to do a quick rapid fire round with you if you're game for it.
Yeah, of course.
What is one dish you've never seen on Top Chef that you're dying for someone to attempt?
Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is that there's no dish I want people to attempt, because the amazing thing about Top Chef is that we put them in circumstances through very specific challenges where they have to create something new from deep in their own heads every single time. And 99% of the time, those dishes would never be created if not for the circumstances we put them in to force them into creativity. And that's the most amazing thing about cooking, right? Every single time you make a dish, it's a little bit different. This day you use basil, that day you use mint, today you're using chicken, but you can also do it with beef and a million other ingredients and factors and that come into play when you are creating from scratch this piece of art that's so ephemeral, right? It's, as Tom has told me many times, sitting beside him at the judge table, like, that's the thing about food. You create this piece of art and then it's gone and you have to start again the next day, and it can be completely different. And the best thing about Top Chef is that we never eat the same thing twice. Not challenge to challenge, not season to season, episode to episode. We don't start with a I want to see this approach.
Yeah.
We start with a what can you do? What can you show us that we've never seen? So the things that I want to see are the things I don't even know about yet. And that's what excites me about my job, is that we get to taste new things every single day. And I'm always, always learning.
If you're stuck in a long day of production and you only have one snack, you don't get to have all of those delicious new creations ahead of you. What is that?
They're not always delicious, by the way, but they're usually delicious. I mean, we joke, but like really, I on set, the two snacks that I'm always looking for and snacking on are black licorice and beef jerky.
Wow.
I don't know why. Not together.
Not what I was expecting you to say.
But they are my on-set snacks. Like, the woman who helps us, like our talent coordinator on set, like every time I come in at the beginning of a season, she's like stocked my dressing room with beef jerky. Oh, and salt and vinegar chips, because they're sort of my like my go-to, can't resist kryptonite.
Well, I was going to ask you salty or sweet, but I think I know the answer now. Salty.
I do love a great dessert, but I'm generally a salty person.
Okay. What would you say is the most underrated kitchen tool?
An offset spatula, flexible fish spatula.
What's a food trend that you love?
I mean, there's a lot of things I love, and it's sometimes hard to differentiate if they're trends or if they're really here to stay, I mean, food trends I love. I just like the micro regionality of how we all can eat these days, right? It used to be that we were eating Italian food or Chinese food or, or let's say Japanese food. But now I feel like we're not eating Caribbean food. We're eating Jamaican food or Trinidadian food or, Barbadian food. We're eating when we think about Chinese food, especially in New York City, I don't say I'm going for Chinese food. I say I'm going for Szechuan or Canton or Hunan. Like, I think that we think about the world and understand the nuances, just like we don't go for American food, right? I mean, the American food of the South is very different than the food of the North because of so many factors. And we understand that here. And I think now the way we eat is reflective of that too, right? That we speak about food with a lot more knowledge, and it has allowed us to dig deeper into these micro-regional cuisines.
And what's a trend that you wish would go away or disappear?
I mean, this isn't an original one, but small plates meant to be shared. Yeah. If it's meant to be shared, don't make it small.
What is your comfort food?
Dark chocolate, matzo ball soup.
And your death row meal?
I mean, that's always a funny question because I don't know. It's hard to imagine, like,
I know. Are you
but if
hungry
we're
at
really,
the time? You know you're
yeah,
about to die,
exactly.
or
That's
you're
it.
not
That's
hungry?
it. I don't know. I could just go big. I like to say I want like a porterhouse steak, and I want butterscotch pudding, and I want sea urchin pasta, because like nothing makes me happier. Also, the ultimate luxury. It's it's a very high end jail that I'm in.
It's a
It allows
very
me to
posh
eat these
jail. Good for you. What a way to
things.
go out.
Go big. I mean, I don't need vegetables if it's my last meal.
You can invite any 3 chefs, living or dead, to dinner. Who's coming?
Julia Child or MF, maybe, yeah, Julia Child, because she just seems like so much fun. I mean, it's sort of a cliche, but I'm sad I never got the chance to meet her. In my right before my time at Food Wine Magazine, she stopped going to the Food Wine Classic in Aspen, where she did go for a long time, and I'm so sad that I missed that opportunity to just be in her presence. Such a huge influence on me and so many, in all of us, but really food, television. I mean, she was the trailblazer that allowed me to do writing, all of it, my job. I mean, if it wasn't for her, everything I do wouldn't exist. Living or dead chefs. Oh my God. I don't know. Yotam Adelangi, maybe, because I just love his aesthetic and his approach to food, and his food is just so deeply delicious every time I get to eat it. There's a million chefs that I love so much. Maybe I invite Danielle too, because he is really the most fun, and I know him. I'm so comfortable with him. He's like my fairy godfather in New York City, and he is like, he just makes a party. He has so much energy, and he's so much fun to be around, but he's also so knowledgeable, and the man knows how to entertain.
Yeah. Well, Gail, I want to ask you the last 3 questions that I ask everyone. The first question I want to ask you, I'm sure you have dined and stayed at some of the best restaurants, the best hotels in the world. What is the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
It's a huge question. I have different answers. I mean, I can think of a million answers, and sometimes they're big and sometimes they're small. I also have lots of bad hospitality experiences, but
oh, we'll get there.
Oh yeah, we don't have to, exactly. I don't know. Maybe this is a small one, but it sticks out. It was the first time that someone did something like this that really struck a chord and felt like they were really listening. And I guess it's about that idea of like being seen as a customer. I think several years ago, I had discovered a farmer introduced me to a vegetable I'd never seen before, a cucamelon. If you don't know what a cucamelon is, it is the size of a grape. It looks like a watermelon on the outside. It's green with white sort of stripes, just like a watermelon, but it's in the cucumber family. It's a little miniature cucumber. You bite into it and it's crunchy, and the inside is a cucumber. It's green and it is a cucumber, but it outside looks like a watermelon, and it's the size of a grape, and you kind of pop them in your mouth, and they're hard to find, but they are seasonal, and now you see them more. But the first time I ever saw one, this farmer from Ohio introduced me to them, and I was smitten by them and just obsessed with them. Just the name and what they were, and how did I never known this, and the world needs to know about the cucamelon. I went for dinner at 11 Madison Park, which I don't eat at very often. This was several years ago, and the head beverage director at the time, he was like the head bartender, I guess had seen a rant I had done on social media or something. I can't even remember. I mean, I knew him personally, but less well than I do now at the time. And as I sat down, they just brought me a cocktail. And they said, can we make you a cocktail? We have a cocktail in mind. And they brought it to the table, and they had made me basically a cucamelon martini. And it just showed up at the table, and it just felt like, wow, they read my mind. They knew. They were paying attention. How do you do that for every customer? But they were, and yes, I had a personal connection to the restaurant. I knew them, but I really believe like this is what they were doing for every customer. And I thought that was like just a really incredible, thoughtful, intentional thing. And it made me feel really special.
And on the opposite side of that, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Well, you know what I was thinking about, and it's not one that happened to me, but it's been on my mind lately, thinking also about the over eagerness sometimes of hospitality, because doing very personal things for your guests can go very, very well and is often with the best intention, but can also backfire.
Yeah.
And there was one instance where it backfired that I thought was interesting. And it didn't happen to me, it happened to my friend, but involved me, which is that very close friends of mine went to stay at a hotel that will remain unnamed. And they showed up at the hotel, and I guess the hotel, to be extra hospitable, and they printed out photographs of them as a couple and put the photographs all over the room. So when they entered their room, there were all these picture frames. And if you started paying attention, there were pictures of the two of them all over the room. And they were like, oh, this is so thoughtful. They put pictures of us. They must have taken them from, their Instagram accounts or whatever to make them feel at home. And it was such a grand gesture. And they're looking through the pictures, and all of a sudden they stop, and one of the pictures in the frame is not of the two of them. It is of me with the husband. He's a good friend. It was just a picture that had been posted online of the two of us away on a trip together eating dinner. And they paused and laughed because I'm very close with both of them. But the thought was that could have gone really wrong.
Yeah.
They had clearly thought that it was a picture of her. We sort of look alike. We could pass for sisters. But who knows who that picture could have been of?
Yeah.
And wow, what if it was his mistress? I don't know. He does not have a mistress. I'm just saying, that it's a funny thing that you have to be very careful of if you're going to go that extra mile.
Yeah.
Fact check. Because someone printed out that picture, put it in a frame, and it was not of her. And if she had not known that woman in the picture, regardless of who the person was, that would have been really, really awkward and would have definitely left them with a different sort of taste in their mouth.
I would have shortened their hotel stay, that's for sure.
Right. It caused lots of problems. It was like a very White Lotus moment,
And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
I think a lot of people have mastered it. Too many to name. Because I think there's just so many great instances at big and small levels, at mom and pop shops, at tiny out of the way hotels, at little roadside stands, where they do it really well simply because they make you feel welcome and they make you feel included, and they give you a takeaway that leaves you thinking about, it in a positive way, and then sharing it in a bigger way and integrating that experience into your consciousness. I say a lesson I've learned from Top Chef and, from actually really from Tom Colicchio, who's been such a mentor of mine for 20 years working together. He used to say this, and I see it more and more, and I say it all the time now too, that people go somewhere for the food or the drink or the reputation of the hotel, but they go back, they return for how that place made them feel. And that to me is the definition of hospitality. Because anyone can cook a great plate of food or make a great cocktail or have really high thread counts on their very comfortable beds. But it doesn't it's why you want to go the first time. But the point of hospitality is making you dream about it and remember it and letting it linger in your memory so much so that you want to go back. Because they did something extra, because of how they triggered an emotional response in you and made you understand the place better, made you be able to relax and enjoy it in a better way, in a deeper way. And they gave you something sort of to hold on to that felt tangible emotionally. And I think that, how it made you feel is what differentiates a great meal from a truly hospitable experience.
Gail, this has just been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a joy.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. You know that friend who, when they call and ask if you want to go out to dinner, you say yes before they even finish speaking? Because they'll not only pick the perfect place to go and the exact right thing to order, but they'll also bring energy and fun and great stories, the things that make a meal truly unforgettable. That's what talking to Gail felt like for me. She is someone who embodies curiosity, warmth, and a deep respect for the craft. both in food and in storytelling. I was so impressed to learn that she's really played the long game from day one. She knew she wanted to be in food media from the start, but she didn't know how to get there or even what there would look like when she did. So when someone told her she needed more culinary credibility, she didn't hesitate. She went to culinary school. She worked in 2 notoriously tough kitchens. She invested her time, her money, and her full belief in the vision that she had for herself. That might sound straightforward, but I think we all know how hard it is to double down on a dream before you have proof it will actually work. I still find myself questioning things all the time. So for her to commit for years at such a young age just speaks to her character and her clarity of purpose. A lot of that, I think, comes from her willingness to say yes early in her career. She said yes to working for a world renowned chef, even though that wasn't in her original plan. Yes to writing gigs and editorial work that taught her the discipline of storytelling. And yes to taking 3 weeks away from her dream day job to film a first of its kind TV show, which at the time she could barely explain to her mom. All of those yeses helped shape her career path, one that didn't exist when she started out. And because she paid close attention to how she felt in each of those experiences, she's now in the part of her career and in her life where she can lean into the power of saying no. The through line in all of it is Gail's lifelong quest for learning. From culinary school to working in kitchens to her early jobs at Vogue and with Danielle, from learning how to become a TV personality at a time when there was no blueprint for what that would look like or rule book to follow, and from discovering underrepresented food scenes across the country and the world. Houston, I'm looking at you. And even now, with a seat at the table of the global culinary conversation, she's still discovering new things every day, like what a cucamelon is and how it makes for a fantastic martini. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.